So I'm really pleased to welcome Mick Massie to talk about 20 odd years with the LNHS and the recording and wonderful things that he's found. Mick has been an inspiration to me and many others in the LNHS. He's the one that got me onto the Ecology and Entomology Committee and then landed me with the chair role and not quite ran away. He's still on the committee, but yeah. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Mick. And really fascinated to see your presentation.
Okay, ready to go. You stay on the line there, Kieran. I want to make sure that I don't have any Wi-Fi problems like I had on the last time I did this talk.
Will do.
Not like this. Okay, that's just a placeholder. That is something that I'm going to skip over now. We'll not as we're short on time. So I'm going to be talking about my time with the London Natural History Society when I joined in 2002. And it's just very much a personal, high-level ramble through various aspects. I'm Kieran, when he put an advert out on this talk, talked about me being a seasoned expert, which I agree with the seasoned part, but expert I don't claim to be. I'm very much a generalist. None of the specialist recorders that we have are going to learn anything about their particular area during this talk. It's very much going to be a high level talk, hopefully that got something for everyone. I got lots of slides. I got probably too many slides for the time allowed, so I'll adjust my pace as I go through. Um, I'm covering quite a long period of time, over 20 years, so my memory may fail me on several points. So please, if you've got any corrections as we go through, please put them in the chat. I won't see them on the fly, but I'll see them at the end, and everyone else can see them as I'm going through. So please, I won't be embarrassed at all if I make any mistakes. Okay. So I'm going to go back to 2001, which is before I joined the LNHS, and I really knew very, very little about anything to do with natural history. I've always had a sort of a passing interest in natural history, but I was too busy doing other things to do anything serious about that. The 2001 was a pretty rotten year for a number of reasons, two of them being it was the year of foot and mouth in Britain, and that meant that going out into the countryside was highly restricted, and it was actually worse than COVID at the time. And we also had the 9/11 happening that year as well, if you recall. Um, I knew virtually nothing about any of the specialist groups, but I did have three books in my possession at that time. I just bought Alan Mitchell's Field Guide to Trees because I felt I couldn't recognize trees and I should be able to do that. I had my 1950 something Observer's Book of Birds from was labeled as Form 1M, so I had that when I was in first year of secondary school, and I'd carefully bound the Observer's book with brown paper as we used to do. I also had a copy of Michael Roberts' Spiders of Britain, which was the Bible for spiders, and I did have a bit of an interest in spiders, but I was pretty well in most other areas a complete novice, particularly in botany. So it's a shame that Neil Anderson isn't gave his apologies for this, because I'm going to be giving him a shout out here. 2002 was the year that I bought my first digital camera. And when I was taking a walk along the Thames near to my house over on the other side of the river in Barnes, I came across this notice talking about the fact that there was going to be someone leading a walk around. And it turned out that leader of that walk was Neil Anderson. And Neil and I got chatting after the meeting, and he was the man who said, well, in fact, I asked him, what should I do in order to further my interest in natural history? And he said, you should join the LNHS. And it's the best advice I've probably had. So we saw things that day that I'd never seen before. I'd never seen a blue-tailed damselfly, and I remember Neil pointing that out. Neil asked a question, a trick question, where he asked the people there to identify a tree species. And because I'd got the tree book a few months before, I'd actually taught myself a Norway maple to distinguish it from a sycamore. And so I was able to put my hand up and answer that. I felt very pleased about that. And I was very pleased to hear that there was a plant called nipplewort, which I'd never heard of before. Anyhow, it seems like a long time ago, 2002. Richard Fitter was the LNHS president at that time, and he gave a talk, his annual president's report, The Wildlife of London 2100, Crocodiles or Polar Bears, which is really quite prescient for the time. Just made a note there that the world population has gone up by 28%, nearly over a quarter in the years since 2002, which is quite a lot. So there we go. I bought my my Finepick 6800, and and that was really a revolution at the time. I was able to take a photograph like this one of the heron. I wouldn't have dreamt of trying to do that with a film camera, because you need to take 50 shots until you get a decent one. So digital camera really changed everything. I didn't use any film camera from that day onwards. So just to remember that 2002 was 5 years before any smartphones. The iPhone wasn't launched until 2007, which, you know, is really a very short time ago. And it was 2 years before anything like any social media, any like Facebook or YouTube or whatever else. And we were all using dial-up in those days. Even I was working from home in those days, but I didn't get broadband until just about then. All that stuff was just starting. So that was a big revolution. My Finepick 6800, which I subsequently sold on eBay for almost as much as I paid. Anyhow, 2002, we used to have to carry around a whole lot of stuff. We all had a Nokia 3310, I think. That was a mobile phone, and not many people in LNHS, not really technophobic people, or we are technophobic people, but that was the phone that we had at the time. We had our E-Trex altimeters with its 64 by 128 screen, and we'd have to carry all of these other things that everybody had. None of my kids today are wearing, they're adults, but none of them are wearing wristwatches anymore, but they all rely on their phones. So here's a picture from a book that I picked up later. It was a book by Gilles Martin, who's a Belgian naturalist. And this is a picture of his field studio, as it was called in slide days. So this is the kind of thing that digital cameras and later smartphones have liberated us from. And there he is with his field guided to looks like it's beetles of some type anyway. So that's the kind of background that we were coming from, and of course smartphones and digital cameras have completely changed that. So first thing I did when I joined in 2002 was I went along to the Bookham Common Survey, which was held every month. And this was our headquarters in 2002. That was subsequently changed by a much more grand, well, you see the kind of tarpaulin that was over the roof at that stage. But Bookham was a real eye-opener for me. And the main reason for that was down to Ian Menzies, or Ian Mingies, as some people would call him, who was the chairman of the Bookham Common Survey at that time. I owe a tremendous amount to Ian. I met him the first time that I turned up there. He was there every month with his immaculately made beating tray, homemade beating tray. He was a medical doctor, and his skills at making these were legendary, and everyone who got to be given one by Ian, I'm sure, is still using them today. It was an amazing construction, and much, much better than any of the commercially available ones. So Ian was a lovely guy, tremendous help to me, a tremendous help to everyone, a leading coleopterist, but a very good general naturalist as well. And we miss him terribly. So my first dealings with the Bookham Common Survey were going out with the botanists, because I knew absolutely nothing about, virtually nothing anyway, about botany. I knew a few trees, and I suppose I could tell a daisy from a dandelion, but not much more. And one of the things that we turned up, that the botanists were looking for on one of the first trips I went with them, was the adder's tongue fern. And I was really captivated by this because I'd never heard of it before. And I got the guy who was leading the trip to spell out its name, in its scientific name, for, and I had to have him repeat it for me several times. Ophioglossum vulgatum. I thought that was great, a great name, and something that was great to see. So here's another one of the botany trips that I went with. This was a trip out to West Drayton, and the botany trips were really good, and have always been really good and really active, whereas the ecology and entomology field trips were pretty thin on the ground in those days. So reflect on that as we go through. Here's a plant that I photographed on one of the early botany trips, and this was something, again, that I'd never heard of before, broom rape. And what captivated me about this plant is that it's a parasitic plant, which I think most of you will know. But at that stage, 2002, when I took that photograph, I'd never heard of really parasitic plants, other than a couple of things. And so the idea of parasites has been quite an eye-opener for me. And rather than thinking of parasites as being something that are a thoroughly bad thing, my opinion on that has completely changed. Now, here's one of the pictures that I took in 2002, and I was rather pleased to get this marble white, pair of marble whites here. We've already had a plug for Leslie's immaculate Butterflies of London publication. And if you look at that, if I hold this up to my screen, wherever my camera is, anyhow, this has been one of the insects that was on, well, it's on 5 squares back in 2002, and they're all, no, sorry, 7 squares, and they're all either up in the extreme northwest or the extreme south of our area. And now that's a butterfly which is pretty well ubiquitous in grassland everywhere. So there's something that's dramatically changed over the period of time. And there have been so many of those. And you've heard from the Recorder reports today some of the things that are new just to this year. Not all of them have exploded to the extent, but London is such a dynamic area and there's so much going on that there's always something new to find. And it's something that every member can witness. It's not just for the specialists. Now here's Edward Milner on one of the rare ecology and entomology field trips that were held in 2002. This was to one of Edward's favorite patches, which is Mile End Park. And we're there with Dan Hackett, who was one of the leading coleopterists in the society at that stage. And also sitting there, we have in the blue Catherine Schmidt, who was the secretary of the ecology and entomology section at that time, and was a absolute stalwart secretary and kept the section going for periods when it was fairly moribund. Here we got this is 2003, the Haringey fungal foray, and we've got Ted Tuddenham doing his dog and pony show there. Great fun to go along to, and still running today. Here's another one of Edward. This was a 2004. This was a spider hunt, spider field trip rather, to Horsenden Hill, and this ferret turned up, which is a novelty for us all, particularly for my dog, as I recall. But that was obviously somebody's pet that had escaped and just came over to check us out. Now here we got Rodney Burton, the leading botanist in our society. Lovely gentleman, another lovely gentleman, taking his photographs with his film camera. This was when we on a botany field trip to Lewis, and there he is with his 64 ISO Kodachrome, no doubt, taking a photograph of a plant on that trip. Rodney was a delightful man, as there are so many that I could describe as such within the society. But Rodney was a great help to me over many years. Another man who's dearly missed. I called this photo, this was Beachy Head, and we're actually on the cliff tops of Beachy Head here. This is another botany trip, and I labeled this one Where's Ringo, because we got George, Paul and John here in this shot. George Handsome, Paul Bartlett and John Edgington, three terrific botanists, very good, all of them very good company. And we're right over the top of the cliffs there, and they're looking, I think they were looking for Portland spurge at that point, which was one of the rarities that occurs there. Three great guys. I've spent many hours in the field with all of them, and really, if you're going to be any good as an entomologist, you've got to know your plants. And so the years that I spent catching up on my botany were really valuable to me, and I recommend that any of our people who are any of our members who are on this call today, I recommend that they go on the botany trips, because it's really important from an entomological point of view. Here's a photograph from Bookham in 2005. On the left here of the screen, that's Ian Menzies again, and he's checking out some turkey oaks that had died, and you see these piles of sawdust around the bottom, and those sawdust is created by a beetle called platypus here, and this is one of the ambrosia beetles. And I found this really fascinating because here we have a beetle which doesn't actually kill the tree, but exploits dying and weak trees by tunneling into the trees and casting out all of this sawdust. But the beetle actually feeds on a fungus which develops within the galleries within the tree. And that's why they're known as ambrosia beetles, ambrosia being the food of the gods. And we'll come back to this one a little later. This was a very rare beetle at one stage, but its numbers dramatically increased after the 1987 storm when there was so much dead and dying timber around. So it's a tiny little beetle and makes these D-shape holes in the bark. So here's I'm now up to the present. In fact, here's a tree here that's dying in my local park in Chiswick House Gardens, and this is a tree that's it's actually weakened at this stage. It's not dead, but again, this is I noticed this first by these piles of sawdust around the base, and that is caused by that same beetle platypus that we saw in the previous slide. And what's happening here is that this tree is succumbing to acute oak decline, and this is a new problem for oak trees in Britain. It was described as a thing back in 2014 well, that's when acute oak decline was described, and it's a complicated thing, but there's a bacteria involved that is actually causing the problem. But that bacteria may well be spread by jewel beetles that also drill into the wood and help the spread of the bacteria. So there's something that's come around again. I was lucky enough to start a part-time natural history course at Kingston University back in the early 2000s. And one of the things that allowed me to do was to go on field trips and also cover all aspects of natural history. And one of the main ones that I really got fired up about was geology. And this slide is from one of the geology field trips that we went on. What you're seeing here is you can see the railway line running through, and this was the scene of a huge landslip that occurred in 1915, and it destroyed the railway line at that stage. The interesting thing about it is that the reason that the landslip occurred was that for years before, several years before, the Folkestone Harbour had been created. And in that harbour being built, it interrupted the flow, the longshore drift of material along the coast, which had been washed out of the cliffs further to the west and was drifting along the coast. And that longshore drift effectively protected the coastline here. And when Folkestone Harbour was built, it interrupted that flow, and hence, in 1915, the landslide, the rotational landslip occurred. And now I find that really fascinating and really ignited my interest in geology, which persists to today. And of course, geology was a major factor in Darwin's work in the mid-19th century. because he was able to contemplate evolution over geological time in a way that hadn't been available previously. Am I still talking to everyone, Kieran?
Yeah, we're all still listening.
Very good. It's 20 to 8. Here's another one from another field trip. This is one of our field trips to Scotland, and this is up in Skye at Staffin Slipway, and this is a footprint of a Jurassic theropod that with my boot next to it, which there've been some very recent new discoveries of theropod footprints up there, which really lit me up and got me interested in geology in quite a big way. I just put in a plug for this book, The Geology of London. We do a joint field trip every year now with the London Geodiversity Partnership, where I lead from a natural history and an ecology point of view, and Diana Clements, who put this book together, leads from a geology point of view. And we look at the influence of the geology on the flora and the ecology of the areas that we look at. This book, The Geology of London, is a series of geo-trails which you can do by yourself. And I thoroughly recommend it. It covers the whole of the geology of London. So we do one of these trips each year, and I enjoy them very much. Okay, where are we now? 2005. Here's something that was new at the time. This was the write-up in the Richmond and Twickenham Times, and I got a name check there as a Chiswick Ladybird enthusiast, Mick Massie, and I was able to provide a photograph. This photograph here was taken some time later. Of course, that there was a lot of scaremongering around at that time that the harlequin ladybird was going to decimate our native fauna. But today it's ubiquitous and found in huge numbers. This was a mollusk field trip. We haven't had a mollusk recorder, and I'm very glad to hear that Nina has joined us now as mollusk recorder. Our previous mollusk recorder left just after I joined, and we haven't had a mollusk recorder in all of the years that I've been a member. So I'm very glad that we can now reinvigorate that. That we brought in June Chatfield, the amazing June Chatfield, to run a couple of trips for us. And here we are on Wimbledon Common looking at some of the mollusks from the ponds there, with my dog Dingo keeping us company in the foreground. Okay, one of the things that we, at this stage, 2006, I joined the Ecology and Entomology Committee as just a regular member. There wasn't much going on there. One of the things that I organized was that we bought a portable moth trap for the section, which then eventually went down to Perryville Woods to be used for several years. But here I am with Ian McKinnon on Crane Park Island doing a moth trap. As I recall, we got a very poor result, but there you go. Here we are, 2006, another newcomer that was being very popular in popular press, the wasp spider. This is a photograph that I took in 2006 at Hounslow Heath, although we'd had scarce records going back before that. What we've got here is the large female, which is the one that normally gets photographed. But here we have the much smaller male hanging around waiting for his chance and guarding his patch, I guess. But there's something that has now become familiar. I think the numbers have gone down, certainly in the they became very, very common at one stage at many sites, but I think the numbers have gone down recently. Edward might have a comment on that, and we're not seeing as many in the last few years. 2007, I took a trip to Canvey Wick with, which was a site that had just been taken over by Bug Life, an old refinery site, and that was a classic brownfield site. And there we saw this a megachile leafcutter bee for the first time for me anyway. This is a leafcutter bee that nests in sandy areas. 2007. Now there is another newcomer to London. It was known for a while as the Tesco car park spider because it was first found, I think, in Britain in the Tesco car park in the Isle of Wight. But this was my first one that I found. That this was actually on a botany trip, as I recall, to Hampton Court, and this one was sitting on the wall at Hampton Court. Now that's a spider that has become completely ubiquitous all over London and over a good proportion of Britain. And you may recall that it caused a lot of excitement and caused a lot of schools to be closed in East London and in Brent as well, I think, not that many years ago, because they'd been found on the schools, and the local authorities closed the schools and had the schools fumigated. I'm sure that had no effect whatsoever, because as far as I'm concerned, this spider is on every building in London and will quickly re-establish itself after it's been fumigated. That's another spider from 2006. This is a find that I made on Horsenden Hill, and this is Aeroaphana, and this is one of the pirate spiders. This is a spider that invades the web of other spiders and takes over the spider prey and kills the spiders that have created the web. And this, in fact, was a first Middlesex record. And I got to do a write-up for the spider recording scheme, and I got a great deal of help from Peter Harvey, who ran the spider recording scheme at that time. And Peter was great helping me over several years, as was, of course, Edward too. But that was my sort of first, if you like, and as I say, first Middlesex record. Previously, in my spider book, it said that it was very rare in Britain and only occurred on a limited number of sites in Dorset. So, but that has now spread to become pretty widespread over much of England, certainly. Here's another spider that caused a bit of press, the tube web spider, which happens to be pretty common in my area in West London. This article here was talking about the fact that it was found on the Kew Bridge, and there's a write-up from the Natural History Museum talking about it. So there we go, 2006. That's my photograph of it, because it's a spider that hides away in a tube in brickwork typically, and has these iridescent green jaws and can deliver a nip, but they're very, very unready to get involved in any sort of fisticuffs. And then here we got this is my local church wall, and Tristan Bantock's come along to take photographs of this spider, which is now pretty common generally. but very common in my area. Plant galls, I got interested through Ken Hill originally, and then by Tommy Root, who became the plant gall recorder for us. By that stage, I'd become the chairman of the Ecology and Entomology Committee. Plant gall is a great area for first records because they don't move around. As long as you know your plants, you can start looking for these things as they arrive. A couple there I've mentioned, one on oak that first recorded in 2008, and then the ram's horn gall, which had been recorded a little earlier than that, but then now has become fairly common on oak trees. This was another one that caused excitement. This was a wasp that was thought to cause galls, which reduced the efficiency of sweet chestnuts. And this one I first was alerted to in Leslie's Abbey in 2017. This has spread fairly widely since then. This caused quite a lot of excitement in DEFRA, who were planning the destruction of a lot of sweet chestnut trees in order to slow the spread down, which luckily has not happened. That's a gall that occurs on fungi rather than a plant gall, and that's caused by a flat-footed fly. It's still pretty common in our area, but it only occurs on one of the Ganoderma bracket fungi that species that I'm aware of. So they're hard. These fungi are hard to tell apart. So if you find this, you know which one you've got. You've got Aplanatum. I mentioned before, it's 10 to 8. I mentioned before that I got interested in parasitic things, parasitic organisms, and I also get interested in mutations. Mutants and parasites are something that I enjoy finding out about. And here's a couple of examples from my local patch in Chiswick House. So here we've got rat's tail plantain, and here on you see the regular seed head of rat's tail plantain, and here this is a subject of phyllodes, and this is where instead of developing as flowers and seeds and fruits, the plant's parts develop into leaves. And so this here is just multiple leaves rather than flowers and fruits. And here's another example of plant mutation, fasciation. This is white bryony, which is normally white bryony flower, which is normally half of this, where the flower is effectively double the number of petals and double the number of sexual parts as well. So I find these things really interesting from an evolution point of view and from a genetic point of view. Parasites and mutants are what I like. Here's something that was new a while ago, 2009-10, the Bombus ignorum, the tree bumbleberry. New to Britain, I can't read my slide because I've got the summing up, but it was new to Britain a while before that. Became very common, often found in old bird boxes, like you can see on the left here. This is in my son's garden, as it happens. But I think the numbers of this are way down. I was interested to see Tony's records showing it was up this year. Hasn't been my experience. I just want to talk about another spider. This isn't a new, but it's an unusual spider. This is Hyptiotes. And these spiders, this is from Bookham Common. don't have venom. And they, in fact, this is a male, which you can see his magnificent sex parts here. A male, and the male and the female actually become part of the web itself. And the web is off in front. The main web is a triangle, which is off to the left-hand side here. And what happens when a fly or an insect hits the web, the spider collapses the web and ensnares the victim. And they do that and they don't have any venom. They rely on the web to ensnare the victim. Here's another spider from Bookham, quite celebrated, the strawberry spider, which is still rare in our area. And I regularly get calls from people to help them, guide them to where they can find these spiders. I'll reduce my talking about that. Here's another little vignette which is going on in my garden. So here we've got a Misumena crab spider, the white spider on the right here, with its victim, another bee, a different species of bee here, just calmly going around about its business. And these little babies here are scavenger flies, jackal flies, which hang around the spider and wait for it to catch something for them to benefit from, attending the corpse, and they're known as scavengers or jackal flies. One of my favorite plants, I've already mentioned once, is white bryony. And here's an example of the kind of drama that goes on around white bryony. So white bryony has several organisms that are obligate on it. We've got the bryony bee here, which is quite a rarity nationally, which only takes pollen from white bryony. I've photographed it here in my local park. Here we have the bryony ladybird, male and female, which only feeds on white bryony and was first described, it was first recorded in Britain by Ian Menzies in his, but recorded by his granddaughter, I think, in her garden in West Molesey. And there's the larvae of the white bryony. It also has that so they only feed on white bryony. And similarly, the bryony tephridid fly, Goniglossum, that lays its eggs on the seeds, and the larvae develop in the seed pods. I'm coming up to 4 minutes to 8, so I'm going to have to decide how to continue, because I've got quite a bit still to talk to, but I can take advice on that, Kieran, how we want to play it. Quite an ordinary plant, a plant that's often regarded as a weed, black horehound, smelly little thing, but very important for lots of things. This is the forgotten the common name for it, but the shield bug, pied shield bug. It has this is a new shield bug that arrived in Britain in 2011, and here I recorded it in the Crane Valley, and that only feeds on black horehound. And here's another bug from Tristan's very familiar with, Raglius, and that's another bug that feeds only on black horehound, and that's a notable bee. Not a new to Britain, but these two are entirely dependent upon black horehound, a grubby little weed. Here's another new to Britain that I first saw at Ham Lands with actually with a botany trip, I think it was. And this is called the flat clown beetle. It's a predatory beetle, which you can see from you can tell from its jaws here. And new to Britain, whatever it says there, I can't read that on my screen, but I'm indebted to, let me just close that down. I'm indebted to Paul Cook, who is a vigorous recorder of all kinds of things across his patch. And so that lives under the bark of typically fallen trees. Another one from that sort of area is this one, the Asian clam that was new to Britain in 1998, first occurred in East Anglia, I think it was, and it was recorded for the first time in 2004 in the Thames, the Asian clam Corbicula fluminea, and it is now very, very numerous in the Thames. I actually took this photograph, this one here this morning, because it's the drawdown currently on the Thames. So the Thames is tidal all the way up to Teddington, and huge density of these. These are all the Asian clam there. So that's something that's become hugely numerous in the Thames and several other rivers since it first arrived. Doesn't seem to be causing any major ecological problem to my knowledge, unlike some of the other invasive mollusks. Here's another new to Britain, this one. This is my record of a new to Britain. It's a little tiny ant. I was familiar with another Temnothorax species, but I took a photograph of this one on one of my drilled fence posts in the garden, and got it identified with the help of Mike Fox, our ant recorder, the national ant recorder. And that's the distribution map, the current distribution map, because this, as far as I know, is the only record in Britain. The colony was quite small, about 50 ants or so, and it died out. And as far as I know, it's no longer there. I suspect it came as an import and failed to establish. So thanks to Mike, and thanks to all of our recorders who helped me so much over the years. The alder-leaf beetle was considered extinct. It's now widespread, ubiquitous, not just on alder these days, but it was considered extinct up until 2004. With the help of another one of our recorders, this was a record of a wasp that hadn't been recorded since 1853 in Britain. And I persuaded Tony Madgwick to come along with me to have a look at Chiswick House Gardens. Tony's made a couple of trips there. And when we were there in 2022, we found this male of this very unusual looking wasp. As far as I know, Tony, you might correct me in the chat. As far as I know, it hasn't been seen since anyway. So another probable vagrant. Here we are at the AES exhibition. We used to put up a stall for London Natural History Society every year at the AES exhibition. We gave that up because most of the people there are not from London, and we didn't get that many people turn up. But here with Stuart Cole, who's one of my friends, who's a very good coleopterist and a great help to me over many years. And Catherine Schmidt, who I already mentioned, kept the section going for many years. I regularly get questions about people have found these things in their gardens or in their allotments. The southern green shield bug that arrived many years ago. I get it every year in my garden, and that's arrived from the Mediterranean area. And it looks, the adult here that I've just put up, that looks suspiciously like our own native green shield bug, but it has these 3 dots just above the leading edge of the scutellum. So here's another one that's arrived, first British record in 2001, the Southern Oak Bush Cricket. First record was 2001. And this bush cricket is flightless. You can just see here its tiny little wings. So it's obviously walked all the way from Ethiopia to get to Britain. But I suspect hitches a ride on buses and trucks and things like that and brush up against the oak trees. And interestingly enough, I read recently that it's a predator of another newcomer, Camararia occidella, that arrived in Britain in 2002, the horse chestnut leaf miner that makes all those brown blotches in horse chestnut leaves. So here we've got 2 newcomers, one predating the other. I was involved in a study of looking for this rare linifid in Epping Forest with Tony Russell Smith and David Nellis from the Arachnological Society. And this was a write-up for David's obituary in the Spider Recording Scheme newsletter of a little while ago. I just want to put a quick plug for a good friend of mine, Andy Sands. Andy's the guy who runs the Chiswick Camera Centre. Here he is taking photographs of leafcutter bees in my garden with his quite elaborate, this is quite a while ago, he uses a much simpler, but he runs this Chiswick Camera Centre. He was a very accomplished bird and mammal photographer and reptile photographer, actually. And I got to know him, and we got to be friends, and I got him into insect and invertebrate photography. So here we are in Windsor Park looking for a rare crane fly that I think only occurs on a couple of trees, on a couple of hollow trees there. Here we are looking for sand wasps, and that's the classic sand wasp photographing. Here we are in Hampton Court looking for the cardinal spider. And Andy's now an expert on many areas of insects, and he's also heavily into slime molds. You can follow him on Instagram, and he's fantastic slime mold photographs. And he also contributed these photographs on the cover of the Bee Bible that was published just a couple of years ago. Another couple of people I want to mention, Stuart, I've already mentioned Stuart Cole. Here is leading a field trip for us of a few years ago. And here we got Tristan. Grave grubbing is a standard entomological technique, looking for tiny bugs on sedums in the graveyard in Chiswick. Here we are on a field trip in 2009 in Bushy Park, and that's me flying through the air to sweep for this little bug here, which that's Tristan's photograph of it, that only occurs on mistletoe, and of course the mistletoe is very plentiful in Bushy Park. Oh, we got a movie. Oh, this is a Gasteroptean ovipositing on the bee hotels in Malibone. So I'll just leave that as a They have this huge, long ovipositor. They're there every year, and they are on base and piece. This is a bug that was first recorded in Britain. Another one outside the Natural History Museum on the plane trees there. It has a complicated taxonomy, and I'm now not sure whether it's one or two or separate species or not, whether it's Longiceps or simply a part of the Rosellii, but now ubiquitous on every London plane. I think maybe I'll take a break at this point after talking about this one. This is an ichneumon that I photographed at Bookham Common on oak logs that had been cut there. This one, I didn't know what it was, couldn't identify it, and a couple of years later, it was identified by Gavin Broad, who saw my photograph, and it was published as new to Britain. So I got a plug on there in 2000. That was from 2015, and so this is a large, new to Britain ichneumon that parasitizes wood cerambicids, large beetles. There's another one that I got identified from a phone photo. This was from 2023 in Wormwood Scrubs, and I was identified by Malcolm Story and confirmed by Leonard. They are working on an upcoming field guide for ichneumons, which will be a fantastic thing. We've never had such a thing before, but here's something identified from a mobile phone photo, put up on iNaturalist, and there we got Darwin's quote talking about ichneumons, the parasites. It's 8:10. I'm going to show a couple of videos and then I'd call it. Here are IDBs, which are relatively new to us in the London area. Now, only take pollen from ivy and are now pretty common in our area. I just want to go on to one more. Another one that I've found in my garden. These are my Helix licorum, Turkish edible snail that I've got a big colony of in my garden and are now popping up over in various places in Britain. I'll not talk about that one, the gypsy moth, except that is the parasite, one of the parasites of the gypsy moth, and that popped up in my garden in 2018. I just want to say that, say a couple of words about the oak processionary moth. I might as well. Oak processionary moth has caused a lot of excitement, and here you see it they're spraying here for oak processionary moth in Hampstead Heath, and the notice that they put up was that the spraying is not harmful, it only kills non-vertebrates, which I rather bristle at, as you can imagine. That was a first record of a weevil that I photographed, and it had been predicted that it would arrive in Britain, and I had photographed it without knowing what it was. And so the first British record was 2019, was my record. Um, there's a uh, okay, yeah, I can't stop, can I? I'm going to keep going until till the chairman tells me to stop.
I wouldn't do that.
All right, okay. So it used to be that we only had one species of buzzing spider in Britain, and that was this one here um, on the right. But this is one that that looks a bit like that, but I beat it from a um, home oak in Gunnersbury Triangle in 2017. It turned out to be first British record of Anaphina numida. And when I talked about this with Peter, who was the spider recorder guy, he said he'd also recorded it the same time in the Lee Valley. But when I look on the spider recording scheme website now, it says that the first British record is going to be Triangle, so that's mine. That's the female there. It, it's female adult in the autumn, whereas this one is accentuata, is more a spring species. And there's a male, which I recorded at a similar time, but this one had just turned up this year, in fact. So the male is quite a delicate little thing. Here's another record. This was first recorded by Edward back in 2011 with Anaphina sabina. And I recorded this one on a sort of BioBlitz on the Hogs Mill in Kingston, now become very common. So we've now got 3 buzzing spiders. Just talk a little bit about my garden pond. I dug it myself several years ago, and this is what it looks like. You can see the sort of size of it. It's roughly a bit under 3 meters square. And this is interesting because I've had to repair this. I've lined it obviously and kept it. And these are the newts that I found in the pond when I had to empty it. And there are about 50 newts here, and 49 of them are palmate newts, which is quite interesting. But I understand it's because the water in this pond there's quite a lot of leaf fall, and as a result, it's quite acidic. I do get pestered. We used to have lots of frogs, but you can see the heron here is that's sitting on the edge of my pond with a big frog in its mouth. And so the pond has now changed from being a frog pond into being a newt pond, because the newts do tremendous damage to the frog spawn when it arrives. And I do get bothered by this floating water fern, azolla, and it covered the pond at one stage, and I had to get a supply of these weevils, which are obligate to this water fern. And the weevils I got from Cabi, C-A-B-I, to cure my azolla problem. But it's come back again this year. I've got azolla coming back this year, so I'm trying to, if anybody else has got azolla anywhere, or more to the point, if anybody's got any azolla weevils, please let me know, and I'll happily take some off your hands. Couple of other things from the garden. This is Cainoplana variegata, what was known as the Southampton flatworm, arrived in Britain in 2008. It feeds on arthropods rather than earthworms, and now turning up in a lot of places. So if you turn over rocks or logs or whatever in your garden, you might well find this. And this originated from Australia. And then this year, I found this thing called the Obama flatworm, which comes from South America. And this is a species that was only named in 2016, so very new, and turned up in my garden in this year. This is another newcomer, the lovely Zoropsis spinimana, which has become London is one of its hotspots in London since 2012. And I'll just pop on to give you this one. I want to make sure I show you this one. This is one on my back door. And I want to put this in because this is natural speed, and they have the most delightful way of walking around. Obviously, it's being very careful there. That's my ring sensor on the back door. It tells me when the back door's open. I'll just play that again because I think it's so wonderful. And that's quite a meaty spider. And people get very excited, particularly as it's known as the false wolf spider. But these are pretty common now and are synanthropic in that they tend to hang around in or near buildings. And I've got a good supply of them here. Okay. Locally, we had some paddling pools in Duke's Meadow that were 1920s paddling pools, and they were defunct and weren't being used at all. So in 2007, I suggested that they turn them into brownfield sites effectively, or using sand and gravel from the local area. So we got Barrett's, who were building a lot of buildings along the Great West Road. They were happy to come along and deposit a whole load of sand and gravel in these paddling pools, empty paddling pools. And I was absolutely delighted to see this year that the wonderful Ammophila sabulosa, the wonderful sand wasp, was in residence here on this entirely created habitat, which I had something to do with it being instigated. So thanks very much, Barrett's. They gave us the sand and gravel for free, and they were glad to get rid of it. Here's the last one, probably from 2025. This was from our field trip that we referred to earlier on from Hackney Marsh. This was a fly which lays its eggs on fallen poplar trees, and the larvae or saprophages feeding on decaying matter. It's a wing waver that wanders around and waves its wings as it's going. And I put this photograph up on Flickr, and Stephen Falk, who's a national expert on flies and many other things, saw my photograph and said that's the best photograph that he'd seen showing both the abdomen and the wings on the same photograph. So he's going to use it in his upcoming Pisces fly guide, which is highly anticipated. And so thanks to Russell Miller, who was the guy who showed us this on the poplar tree at Hackney Marsh. Osmia cornuta, another one new to Britain in 2010. That's a domestic beetle in my garden that's domestids clean up in bee hotels, in particular Osmia bicornis, the red mason. Another one here, I found this thing that I thought was a moth dead inside the kitchen this year. And I turned it over and saw it wasn't a moth. I didn't know what it was, but I got it identified via social media, and it turns out to be something called a brown-winged planthopper, uh, Pagatia shantundensis, and it's come from China, I believe, and has popped up in several places. So I wouldn't have been able to identify this myself. It isn't in any of the books, and it's only through social media that you can get these, or your friendly LNHS recorder, of course. Okay, last thing. Chiswick Garden 2025. Willow emerald has spread dramatically from East Anglia in 2009. And I'd seen it, that this had been spread, but I was delighted to find that it turned up in my garden this year. It's not on willow, so they don't care what they're on, but here it is on it. I actually have an apple tree, largely dead apple tree, I have to say, overhanging my pond. And these are the scars on the tree from where the willow emeralds have laid their eggs. So I'm really delighted about that. That's it. I'm going to say thank you to a lot of people and pay tribute to a lot of things. In particular, I've mentioned a couple of these things as we've gone through. The Facebook special interest groups have been a great help to me. And I want to pay tribute to, thank you to Kieran for taking over from me. I did 10 years in the chair of the Ecology and Entomology Committee, and enjoyed myself, but I was delighted that Kieran took over and has done a great job. And I also want to thank Catherine, who was the secretary for many years, and to Natalie, who's taken that job over. Here endeth the lesson.